All right.
You being here and holding this conversation with us. And I'm very grateful to have both of you here. Both Lezley. So let me go ahead and get started. So, Ajuan Mance is a professor of English at Mills College and a lifelong artist and writer. Ajuan's comics include the Gender Studies series and the comic strip Check All That Applies. Her comics have also appeared in several anthologies, including most recently Drawing Power, which was the winner of the 2020 Eisner Award. In both of her scholarly writing and her visual arts, Awan explores the complexity of race, gender, and identity. She has shown her work in exhibitions and festivals from the Bay Area to Brooklyn. And she is the creator of two comic series, the Gender Studies and the web-based comic strip, Check All That Applies. Her comics and illustration have also appeared in a number of digital and print media outlets, including most recently at the San Francisco Chronicle, the Women's Review of Books, PublishersWeekly.com, the New York Times.com, and New Yorker.com. Please welcome Ajuan Mance.
Thank you, Karen. Nice to be here.
Lezley Saar was born in Los Angeles to artist parents Richard and Betty Saar in 1953. While attending San Francisco State University, she worked at KPFA Radio in Berkeley as a part of the Black Collective, the Souls of Black Folk, and did illustration for her writer friends. In the late 80s, when she was pregnant with her first child, she started making altar books. Now her work includes paintings, drawings, bookworks, photographs, banners, collages, dioramas, and installations. She has exhibited nationally and internationally and is included in the museum collection, such as the Camper Museum, CAM, MoCA, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Ackland Art Museum, the Crocker Art Museum, the Museum of the Fine Arts, and the Hessel Museum of Art, and the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. Please welcome Lezley Saar.
Hi.
Classical figurative sculptor who creates public monuments of Black bodies in bronze. She studies the strength and resilience of African descendants and creates pictures made of clay with her hands that are then cast in bronze. King prefers sculptures because they inhabit it. Space and space is power. She believes sculptors provide an opportunity to shape culturally significant memories that determine how African descendants are publicly held and remembered. King sculptures link generations by revealing common threads, shared values, experiences, and aspirations. She knows they help those alive today compare and contrast their world, that of the social pioneers, both enslaved and free, who encourage and commit excellence and help create the modern society. Everyone, please welcome Dana King.
Thank you, Karen, for that wonderful introduction. It's a real privilege for me to be here with you and with Lezley Saar and Dana King. And I'm excited to ask you some questions about your work. Thank you for everyone who is attending. I'm pleased that you could be with us today. And I just want to give you a heads up that during this event, I will be sharing my screen intermittently to show images of work by our two guests today. And so let's just get started right away. Um, because this is an event that's part of the Black Women is God, which has in some ways become a bit of an art movement here in the Bay and elsewhere. And because of this interesting time in which we find ourselves, I think I want to start us out with a question and find out from each of you. As Black women artists, as women of artists of African descent in the US at this time, why does Black women's art matter?
I guess I could start. I'm Lezley Saar. First of all, I would just like to say that this means so much to me to be asked to be in this on this interview. The way I navigate through the world, I'm generally perceived as being white. And I know I come from a position of privilege, and I always like to acknowledge that because I think colorism is a huge problem. I think a lot of people who look like me don't do that. So it's really means a lot to me. And at the same time, I don't define myself by the way I'm perceived by others. You know, I define myself by who I am, my background. And part of my background is being the daughter of a really well-known Black artist, Betty Saar. So of course, I have come from knowing that Black women artists are important since I was little and saw my mom working, you know, just in the house. She would be doing her etchings and had huge presses set up and vats of acid just in the sunroom right next to the kitchen. So it felt like a very natural part of our daily life, her studio being right adjacent to our kitchen. And then as we all got older and seeing her get her recognition, especially lately, getting all this incredible recognition, it just sort of like the importance of it is not necessarily the accolades that can come from it, you know, as far as being a Black woman artist, but just how it's so such a main ingredient of one's life and living and an aspect of living, and how we were always had that paradigm and example of like, yeah, you can be an artist, you know, just by seeing how she's done it, and the importance of being creative no matter what's happening. So in a way, just from a very personal level, that's what it means to me.
Thank you. Yeah.
Seeing your art, Lezley, is so powerful. It's mystical and evocative and beautiful. It's transcendent. I appreciate you being here and sharing your vision and your experience with us. And you know, I read something and I never get it right. It's that, you know, you don't become an artist. You know, you just your work becomes. And I have always been an artist, though I had a 25-year career doing something else entirely that satisfied an artistic side of me for that time until it didn't anymore. And I actually didn't know that I was a sculptor until I took just a weekend class with a master sculptor with a friend as a favor to her because it was in another city. And so I went with her. I couldn't even stay for the whole thing. And I realized that this was the work that I was put here to do. And I think it for me, the experience that you bring to the work is for me what's important, and that comes from family history, lore, and stories told and shared around the table or spoken of with cousins, and it's the work of being a woman, period, and what that means and how I bring that to the work that I do. I can't get out of the way of that which I am, right? And that which I am is what I bring to my work. And we represent to little girls like her the opportunity available to us if we choose it. And really, she is why I do the work that I do, so that she can see herself and her family, her grandparents, her aunts and uncles, the descendants she didn't know or doesn't know yet, but she sees that she is of value, that she is important, that she is smart and strong and capable of doing whatever she wants. And I believe that. Like it took me to the age of 50 really to invest in my artistic side. So if it's there for you to do, no matter what that is, it will present itself if you are patient and give it time. I like to represent my family in the work that I do. And that is my Aunt Tiny. And if you're from the South, you know she wasn't tiny, right? And that is my cousin Gloria, who saw that sculpture for the first time at the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. And I can't even begin to describe the honor that both of their presence is and was in my life. And that's what I pull from to do the work that I do is the people who, while I've just said that we can, if we choose, do what we please, and but there are descendants in our families that were not allowed that did not have that opportunity, that had everything taken from them, short of their breath, and then in the end, their breath. So it's for them. This is all for them. And the young people. I love these guys. They just went out there with their mom, I think is the story. And they saw Mr. Rumford standing in a median strip in Berkeley and stopped their car, got out, learned about him. And hopefully they get it. That African descendant, William Byron Rumford, was the second to graduate Cal Berkeley with a pharmacy degree in 1933, became the first African American politician from Northern California to be in the California Assembly in 1948. And he wrote laws that affect us today. That he was a visionary for women's rights, for climate change, and for housing rights, among the many other things that he did. So our lines all connect. They all connect.
It's a lot to think about. And thank you so much, both of you, for these really thoughtful answers. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I will be resharing again so that we can go through the images, because there's so much richness in each of these images that you have shared with us. I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to get a look at least a couple, 3 times. But I want to follow up with a question that I hope that I think your responses brought to mind, and that is this idea of art that seems to be pursuing a particular purpose or addressing a specific set of questions or filling in a particular gap or gaps. And so if you think about, lines of scientific inquiry, people are doing experimentation to answer a scientific question. If you think about your art as a line of creative inquiry or exploration or problem solving, what would that be? And can you tell us a little bit about why?
I think that's an excellent question, because every time I finish a show, there's always this long gestation period of like, okay, well, what do I do next? I don't just want to keep doing the same thing, and what would be the next theme? And then I have to ask myself, well, what's really important to me? What am I thinking about? What is, so part of that exploration, it really has to do with an authenticity as to who I am, and being sure that I'm appropriating is a word that's used a lot, but to be sure that whatever it is I'm doing is coming from a genuine space for my experience or my interest, and that there's some sort of truth there. And So a lot of times my series will be just related to what's going on in my life. I did an early series called Autist Fables because my youngest was autistic, you know, and I just was really exploring, well, what is normalcy with regard to neurological, you know, ability, or how one is perceived neurologically. That's kind of, and then another part of that inquiry is, okay, I have this idea. How am I going to present the idea? Like, what medium? Do I want to do installation, or would this really work with large paintings or small paintings? And it came up with the idea of like, well, I can kind of make a fairy tale about it. So I did these sort of 19th century inspired line drawings with these mythical, strange creatures, just to sort of illustrate how kind of from another world these kids are. I mean, I've always liked surrealism and Dada, but I never thought I'd have it, you know, in my living room every night with this beautiful odd child. Yeah, and then after that, it's just sort of like, okay, now what am I thinking of? And an ongoing thing is always identity and racial identity. And as I said before, I'm Black, but I appear white to most people. And so questioning what is that, you know, is it as you are perceived by others, or is it who you are as far as your growing up and your background and your culture? And well, it's actually both, you know, and I can totally understand if somebody thinks, well, you're not Black if you look white. I just get it. Maybe because I'm mixed, I can see both sides of everything. And I would even ask my friend, oh, like 20 years ago, wow, am I appropriating by doing like portraits of subjects? I mean, I have relatives that look like this cousin, you know. And she said, this is 20 years ago, well, you know, when I was growing up studying art, there weren't enough images of, like Dana's kind of what you spoke to. She didn't see images of representation of Black people in art, you know, and she said, that's really important, you know. And so, okay, if I can do that, but coming from a point of truth, of authenticity to my experience, it's just really important to me. I mean, I just am very concerned about taking up space. About, I had a few qualms, like, wow, do I deserve to be on this show? I don't mean to sound just self-deprecating. It's a questioning, like you're saying, almost a scientific ongoing questioning and researching and trying to keep up with how people are feeling, because people of my generation, oh, big deal, you're not passing. What a wonderful person you are. Well, of course, nobody's going to do that now. Who's 20 years old? You know, it's a whole different thing. Colorism means something completely different now. And as I said at the beginning, acknowledging your privilege. And, you know, I'm long in the tooth and everything, but I try to keep up with how 20-year-olds are thinking. You know, I got a kid that age, and it's really important. So it is an ongoing investigating, I think, and having that inform my work, whatever the topic is, and having it be authentic, investigating myself, how I'm really feeling, and then outside, because things change, you know, perceptions change, the political climate changes.
It's true. And that's a couple of things you said get into my next question, but I won't ask that yet. But this is fascinating. Dana, your line of creative inquiry, if you think about it in that framework.
I do. And, you know, I'm going to go down the path that you have opened, Lezley, that, you know, I create Black bodies in bronze. And my work is a love letter to Black people. I, you know, was born of a Black father and a white mother. And my dad died when I was 18 months old. And while my mom had an eclectic and universal group of friends that you couldn't peg into a hole because it was just everybody, and mixed and Black and gay, and I mean just the whole gamut. And so I always had that access to that, to that group of people and their different lives. But the fitting in has always been an issue, and you know, I've come to the conclusion that I just have to fit in my own head, and that's where I find comfort. So my work is very simple. We are deserving of our memories out in public. so that people can come upon them intentionally or accidentally, but the story and the message is still the same and the learning is still the same. And for every person that sees that story expands. And for every generation that the material lasts, and bronze lasts a long time. So that story continues to be told and lives. And there are just not enough public art pieces that speak to Black folks, and in my opinion. And yes, times change, and I'm so grateful that that is changing as well. But that's what I do, and that's all that I do. And and just like I have to speak in my head to my own comfort of being born mixed race, and the privilege that I have had, and continue to have, I also have to speak in my own head to the creative path that I've chosen. It's not a, I was going to say limitation, but it's not. I've chosen this path. It's chosen me, and I will do it until the day I die, and bring history to the people in the street. They can see it for free. Doesn't cost them anything. And I do that, I suppose, at the expense of other art that I'm drawn to, but I'm good with that. I mean, you know, in between sculptures, I could do whatever I want, but I still find myself doing sculpture. So I guess this is the work for me. So my line of inquiry around the work that I do is really straight. It's about history. It's about the memories of African descendants, and making it accessible and free to any and everybody. That's it.
Great.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I just want to repeat one of the things that you said, Dana. You said we are deserving of our memories out in public, and I think that's such a powerful statement. And I think it feeds into my next question. And Lezley, certainly something that you were saying also about, both of you have explored other media before finding yourselves in the medium in which you do most of your work. And so I'm interested in this idea, the notion of memories out in public, this notion of the stories you can tell and how those stories can be facilitated by particular media. I'm an English professor, and in the realm of literature, there are stories that really work well as a rap narrative, and there are stories that work really well as Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. And certain media are really great for telling certain kinds of stories. If you can say a little bit about your chosen medium or media, if you work in multiple, and why does it facilitate are there some stories you can tell in the work that you're in the medium you're using that you might not be able to tell as effectively otherwise?
Well, first of all, I think it's really interesting that both Dana and I work with history, and I love what she said about that, and being accessible. That's really important too, and free. And so I've often done portraits of actual people from history. I did a portrait of Elizabeth Keckley, who was, I believe, of mixed race and was a seamstress to Mary Todd Lincoln. So I did this big whole banner and was part of this series that I called Mulatto Nation, where I sort of created this fictitious geographical nation, because we're like in between two worlds, and tragic mulatto, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, let's just create a fictional country. And I came up with these mothers and fathers, founding mothers and fathers of the Mulatto Nation. So my idea was to do a huge banner to commemorate, like what would be a commemoration. I don't do sculptures, but that would have been a great medium for such a thing, to honor someone in history. So I did these large banners. They're maybe 8 feet, 9 feet long. This is the banner also. This one is actually of a person with albinism that I often use as a metaphor for myself. But kind of digress. So yeah, for that series, banners were really great. I had a whole long haul of these people from history, these larger than life banners. And I did dioramas, because if you go to some sort of museum, let's say you're in Iceland or whatever, and they have their little museum, and you can sort of see their historic, like what the houses used to look like or whatever. And I even did a gift shop. So whatever the concept is, I will adjust the medium. Now this one here is from my most recent exhibition, which is called Conjuring of Conjurers. So I made these larger than life totems in the foreground there. This is Furness, who's the guardian of shrines within the forest. And I just sort of wrote stories and came up with concepts of different conjurers, whether it was, taken from hoodoo or voodoo or religion in Ifa in Africa or in Bahia in Brazil, and was coming up with the idea of conjuring and how one creates their own reality. And so with that in mind, I could do thematically surrealistic type things. But as far as representation of all these conjurers, I wanted to represent them in different ways. So I did banners, the one in the background. That's Septime, who was a collector of breezes. So that's a larger than life portrait of an imaginary conjurer. So often I'm interested in the narrative and writing my own little prose poem types of things and trying different medium to sort of just stretch how I can further develop the concept and have it be multi-layered. I work with layers to begin with. I'll take found frames like this one. I do it on fabric. I don't just paint on a white canvas. This one is Yasa. She's a trickster who lives in every corner of the forest. And so I can combine my love of surrealism and symbolism and just sort of have this portrait of a person. And the conjuring, it can be thoughts in their mind. It can be the magic that they're performing, the rituals, the rites, the curses, the what have you. And just kind of having, I don't know, fun with it.
They're awesome. Really incredible.
So, and then also sometimes within the medium, if you can kind of have a tension between the scale, this is another large one. This is Nisita, who was a hit or miss mind reader. And so often in the exploration of race, I'll do portraits of people with albinism, or I'll create a negative effect, kind of questioning like this whole thing about race, about are you a perceived, or is it who you are, who you genuinely are, your identity, and or both. And I also did very tiny collages. I didn't include that in the slideshow. So it'll go from very, very small, like 1 foot, to something that's maybe 10 feet tall, just to kind of create a tension or what have you.
Now, would this be one of your found frames?
Yeah, this is from the new series that I based on a poem by Antonin Artaud. It's called Black Garden. And so it sort of looks like the one before, where I have portraits of people and these bizarre thoughts or imagery or juxtaposition of imagery is coming out of their head. But for my mind, the symbolism of using images of nature is kind of like, to me, nature is truth. And what is the truth of your own identity, of your own thinking, of your own beliefs, So I sort of use nature as being symbolic of truth. And then I throw in things that are black and white and just kind of juxtapose different things. It's a very odd sort of symbolic dark poem. And it's not literally illustrating it, but it sort of was my inspiration for this series. I've done 2 of them.
That's wonderful.
And this one is from that series too. So sort of when I'll do a black and white image, it's kind of like setting it apart from the other imagery. Is it a memory? Is it a dream? Is it some thought going on? And trying to make it look like it's photographed, like there's some sort of tension between the reality of it, sort of a high priestess kind of thing. just different thoughts.
Fascinating. That's beautiful work.
Thank you.
I love how intentional you are with your freedom, right? The freedom in here,
Oh.
here, and it's really stunning work. I'm very attracted to it. It's
Oh, thank you. Well, I love your work too. I had a question for you, just a quick one. I don't know if we're allowed to do that or not.
Oh, sure. Yeah, please do.
So when you're dealing with history, and you already sort of spoke to it by placing them in these public settings and getting their story across, how do you feel like dealing with history is dealing with current issues or what's going on now? And
oh yeah, it's direct. It's a direct line. This man, his name is William Lanson, and he was born in the late 1700s in Connecticut. And they don't know if he was free or if he stole back his freedom, but he lived a free man in New Haven, and he was a self-taught engineer. He built out their long wharf to make it the longest in the country so that they could compete for commerce with the port of New York. And he built bridges, and he helped build the infrastructure of this town. He built the canal that ran right behind him on that grassy plain. That's where the canal went. But as I was creating him and his story, so there's no photograph of him. There's no even though he lived until 1851. So I got to create who I thought he would be in the world. And the only thing I knew about him was that he weighed 200 pounds. Okay, was that 200 pounds strong and muscular, 200 pounds short and wide? I didn't know. So I built him strong because he worked with stone. He carved rock out of the quarry. But I was making him when George Floyd was murdered. I was still making him when Breonna Taylor was murdered, when Ahmaud Arbery was run down, gunned down. And I live in Oakland, and the city was protesting and creating art and putting it out in the streets. And I was on this deadline. And I might have stepped off my deadline if the man who had commissioned me wasn't 98 years old. And I was driven to make sure that he saw this piece installed. And he did, and he's an amazing man. But so in the creation of him, they had this thing in Connecticut where they would elect a Black governor to be the liaison between the Black community and the white establishment. And William Lanson was the governor from 1825 to 1830. And they also called that person the king. So King Lanson. So I wanted to create him from 1825 at the height of his strength as a man and the height of his power and access and building in the Black community. And so his hand was placed on his thigh, and it was just going to be an open hand on his thigh. But I realized that the next movement from his hand placed on his thigh, if he were with us today, would be the Black Power fist. And so I wrote to this 98-year-old man who has been just an incredible advocate for Black history and his entire life. And I said just that. I said, we're at a juncture in time where, where we really need to unify. And I think about my time growing up and the unity of the Black Power movement and Black love and just the community taking hold of its power and using it, right? And I wanted that fist, and he said yes. He said do it. He said because I want when a child walks up to this sculpture, I want that child to ask, why is his hand in a fist? He doesn't look angry. So what is that all about? And so from learning about William Lanson, they can also learn about the Black Power movement and the Black Panthers and just, you know, the rise in civil rights activity from the 60s. And so that's my connection from today all the way back to the 1800s, when he was one of 800 free men in New Haven, where every time he stepped out of his doorway, he was evaluated, he was judged, he was hated on, and he was loved by the Black community. He built community. He built a hotel and housing and had an integrated neighborhood. And so that was the thread for me from what was going on that I really couldn't participate in. Because I was on this deadline and because I'm 60 and I couldn't be out there in the middle of COVID when I was creating him because I needed to finish him. So that was my ode to the Black Lives Matter movement. Right?
Wow, wonderful. I'm so
And
glad
so-
I asked, because it was just a feeling I had, you know, like I would not have known that, but I'm sure she's somehow connecting it to something that's going on socially and politically right now.
That's it, exactly. And so I don't normally put my sculptures on any kind of plinth or platform or base, because I want people to connect with them right at where they are, right? But this is the first time I put any of my work on a base, and I created it because I wanted to connect to the rock that he cut with his hands to create his work. But I also wanted it to be a step up so that people could stand right next to him and look in his eyes and touch his hair and feel his jacket and to connect with him. It's one of the hardest installations I've ever had, but it all worked out. But
it's beautiful.
But this is one of those pieces, Professor, that answers the question about material. He's going to stand there for as many years as he's been gone, right? He's going to stand there because bronze lasts forever. And I love the material. I think it gives life to and impassions something that's inanimate, right? And it helps bring it to life for me. And each bronze is different. It's like it absorbs differently. It you know, I don't really even understand the science of the patina, but it impresses me each and every time I come across a piece that has been intentionally colorized. I love him.
Beautiful, yeah.
I love him. So he has a scar over his left eyebrow, right here, and that represented the harm that he experienced every day for being a Black man in that time. It also represents the physical nature of the work that he did to build up New Haven, that it was dangerous. I mean, this is a man who carved rock out of a quarry, put it on a barge, floated it down the river, got to the site, jumped in, unloaded the rock, set it. I mean, you know, he broke bones and probably lost a finger or two. So the scar represents that the physical nature of his job and just the harm of being a Black man. I love him. I joke with people that I build the men that I want in my life because he is fine. Very muscular, very strong, very determined.
Beautiful work, what both of you have brought to share with us, and the work that I've seen that isn't in the slideshow as well. We have, I think, at this point, I just want to ask one more question, then I'd love to open it up if anyone who's attending would like to ask questions, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Great. So my final question for you would be, what are you working on now?
Okay, well, I sort of got into it. It's a series for a show I'm going to have at a gallery, Various Small Fires in Seoul, Korea, coming up in September next year. And I'm basing it on a poem by Antonin Artaud. That's a very sort of surrealistic, symbolic poem. But the poem is called Black Garden. And so I'm doing these images of women, and I'm going to do a few banners. And this is not such a socially political theme as I've dealt with before with gender and neurology and race and those kinds of things. This is sort of more of a bit more ethereal, this theme, and but I sort of wanted to have, like I was saying before, those last two photos, my idea was sort of like they're sort of priestess women warriors kind of within this still melancholic Gothic setting of this poem. I love Gothic melancholic stuff. So I just sort of like taking my thoughts and how I personally interpret them with the iconography and the images and the juxtaposing them to, when you juxtapose sort of things that seem incongruent, it can kind of cause questioning. And a lot of the topics that I come up with are sort of questioning, like, what is gender? I also have the same child I was talking about who was neurologically atypical 6 years ago, became a trans man. So I've dealt with the whole transitioning of my child that was born female now being man and questioning, okay, well, what is gender? And his, I'm getting off key a little bit, but it was just so fascinating, because he looked at gender in a different way that actually is now how it's being looked at more commonly with gender fluidity and non-binary. It was that way 6 years ago when I had to learn so much about it to begin with, because, okay, he's a man, but he wants to wear capes and he still likes knitting and these things that are not necessarily assigned to masculinity, but why shouldn't they be, So in juxtaposing on that series, various iconography and images, it's all about questioning and just sort of getting people to look at it. If they just kind of look at it and go, huh, and then they see the theme is gender renaissance, that was the name of the show, then they might just sort of question that. And so even though this new theme, which is called Black Garden, is more ethereal and but just the notion of Black Garden and all those kind of connotations, and does Black mean dark and melancholic? Is it about race? Garden means things growing, but then sort of dark, like death and life, and just, I don't know, all the strange poetic stuff out there. It's kind of fun because I haven't got a really hard, the last two shows have been pretty concrete what the concept was, and I'm sort of allowing myself conceptually to be just a bit freer and to see what comes out. Almost my approach to painting is like doing collages, the way I juxtapose different images, as you can maybe see in some of those things. And so I sort of think of poetry that way, of not necessarily being linear or you understand it at kind of a different level. So that's the approach to this new series, Black Garden.
That sounds great. I am excited to see, and this idea of strange poetics, I think that's such a great juxtaposition of those two words. So, well, that's really a lot to look forward to. Dana, what's next?
Wow. My guy is right here. You might have guessed who it is based on these photographs. He has a turban. I'm trying to soften his hair because it's so hard and pressure. I'm working on the first sculpture of any Black Panther anywhere. And
wow.
it'll be a bust of Huey P. Newton, and it will live here in West Oakland, on Mandela Parkway and 9th Street, which will soon be renamed Dr. Huey P. Newton Way. It's been an incredible journey with Huey, and I have to tell you a story. So, because he's here, right? He's definitely here with me, and at times when it just is flowing and easy to work on him, I know he's here. But this piece was commissioned by the Huey P. Newton Foundation, and Frederica Newton, his widow, is the head of the foundation. And we went back and forth about what she wanted, how she wanted to honor him. And we ended up, it went from a plaque on the ground where he was murdered on 9th and Center Street, commemorating that day, to a standing plaque on that same site, to a sculpture. And the night that she decided to go with the sculpture, we were texting back and forth. It was late, and I never tell anybody what I'm working on until I have the deal, right? Because superstition, whatever. Because it could go away, and then you're left looking silly. So I didn't tell anybody, not even my family. And the morning after we agreed to do this bust, my grandson, who's now 4, who lives here with his parents, and he came into my bedroom like he does every morning, and he said, "Grandma, there is a panther in your studio." And I said, "Really?" Not knowing what he was talking about. He said, "A black panther." And like, it still makes the hairs on my arms stand up. And he said, "And he's so nice, and he's my friend," and he went on and on. And in the meantime, I'm texting his mom. I'm like, "Has he been watching like the Black Panther? Is he watching something else?" She goes, "I don't even know where his iPad is." And I'm like, okay. He talks about him all the time still. So it just, the honor to bring him to West Oakland, where he was the rock of West Oakland. And just, for Black folks in general, right? But West Oakland is where he grew up, and where he became politically active, and after seeing the lives of his family and neighbors, and being just, tortured by police and disrespected by government, and not having access to services. And so he is literally going to be on top of a huge granite rock. And I've been thinking about, I haven't even told Frederica this, so you'll hear it first. No, but I'm still trying to figure out how to place him on it. And now I'm thinking maybe I need to have him coming out of rock. I don't know, but we'll have to talk about it. But let me see. I'm working on, well, you're just gonna have to wait. Because I'm, I have so many. When you look at pictures of him over time, he was really young here, and there he was older. His hairline changed, the shape of his face changed. So it's been this visual journey with him. I mean, I've read everything he's written, his dissertation, his poetry. He wrote poetry. He and Erica Huggins have a book of poetry called Insights. And I think that's it. And so I've read everything that I could get my hands on about him. I talked to Frederica about him. There are obviously a lot of Panthers who still live here. And it's just a huge honor to create what in it's 2020. Why there's nothing in this city
Mm.
that acknowledges the efforts of the Panthers around unity and service to community is, I mean, I'm grateful that it's begun, but it's been a long time in coming. So he'll be dedicated February 27th.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Next year.
Soon.
Yeah, that is soon.
So he has to be
Beautiful.
done by the end of the month. And Frederica has given me some new notes, and so I'm making some shifts here and there. I mean, how lucky am I that his widow can come and look at him and help guide me to create, you know, the deepest connection of her life, right? So that's what I'm working on.
Oh.
And
Amazing.
Honored. And that, you know, oddly, my other sculptures, they don't live here, and I don't get to see them. And to say that I'm feeling a little extra pressured that he's going to be living here is an understatement. So, but I'm putting my whole heart and soul in it, and again, it's my love letter to the Black community.
That's well, that's so exciting. You know, you're both doing amazing work. I've been looking at your work for years, and it's a pleasure to have a chance to speak with you. This notion of the love letter to the Black community, I feel like in both of your works, there is so much love and curiosity and regard and yet also a candor. And I think all of those things make for amazing, amazing, the kind of art that we need. And so now I'd like to open this up. We have a few minutes. And so is there anyone in attendance who would like to unmute and ask a question, or else type a question into the chat?
Don't be shy.
I have questions too, so I can start us off. But if you have any questions, well, one of the questions that I have is, who are the artists you think we should be looking at right now? I really like looking at your work quite a bit. Are there other, you know, given that you have a platform as prominent artists who are creating work that is seen by many, are there artists who you think we should be looking at this time, about whom we might not be aware?
Well, since both Dana and I sort of deal with history in our work, there's an artist, he goes by the name of Frohawk Two Feathers, or Umar Rashid, whom I think is amazing. He's a friend, and his works are really, really intricate, and he reimagines history with regard to colonialism. And I think on Instagram, it's under Frohawk Two Feathers. He just has an amazing mind, and so he works with narrative and history and reimagining and reconfiguring and how it relates to present day kind of thing. There's just so many amazing artists. I have to say my favorite artist, which might seem quite different to the type of work I do, is David Hammond. He's a friend, he's still friends with my mom, and remember him coming by in the early days when he was doing his body prints. And so it's someone whose work I've just always loved. Maybe everybody's already heard of him, but often it's interesting to see how someone's favorite artist might just speak so different than what I visually do. But I just think he's amazing, his mind and the questions that he raises. And he had a really great show that was down here at Hauserworth in Los Angeles. And, so maybe he's not a brand new artist, but look at what he's doing now. You know, he addressed homelessness in Los Angeles and in an inner courtyard of that prestigious gallery that's worldwide and all about money and Swiss money and all that stuff. He had set up these tents, you know, because there's homeless tents just you walk outside. There's that area of downtown. you know. So yeah, I would say those two just offhand. I mean, I'm sure there's more. I just can't think of them offhand.
Mhm. Thank you.
There's always an artist. Well, I think the women of um, of the Black woman is God. I think that that the work that I've seen over the years just continues to be exciting and speak to the issues of our time.
Mm.
An artist that I am very fond of, who is Oakland based, is Sydney Kane. She also goes by Sage, and I love her work. It's a deep dive into ancestral bonds um, and 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 the spirit, the overcoming of of difficulty, not even overcoming, just finding a way to to build and be in in difficulty, in difficult times, um, and she's a young artist, and I love watching the evolution of of her of her creativity and her style. You know, I guess I mean, yeah, I go to museums and I have deep respect for work that I've seen. I love like going downtown Oakland during this pandemic and seeing the art that is here, that just comes from um, really from many emotions, from love, from fear, from from sadness, from sorrow. Um, that I don't know. That's what excites me, is when I can go out and see the art in communities
Mm.
that exists. I live in East Oakland, and I have a huge wall, a 100-foot wall that has a mural on it, and you know, I feel like the art and community is like it's like a gift for the neighborhood. You know, a way to obliterate the ugliness and the dirt, and to have something beautiful exist. My mom was a Peace Corps volunteer. She joined the Peace Corps when she was 50. And while, yeah, that's great, I think she was a mass colonialist. But whatever, that's a conversation between she and I. But, you know, she wanted to spread the American dream, but whatever. But she was in the Dominican Republic, and I remember going there. I was in college, so this was in like 1980, right? And I loved it. I just I was surrounded by beauty, natural beauty, like, you know, and she worked in very poor communities, but people adorned their homes with flowering trees and art that they painted on their walls, and that has just stuck with me my whole life. I mean, I was, you know, 20 at the time when I saw that, and that to me is what inspires me, is what happens in community when people join together to beautify their space. So that drives me.
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm a terrible, like, I'd be terrible on a game show, because the question is like, tell us what happened in 1479 between the British, and my brain just like freezes. So when you said, tell me who you're really interested in, I'm like, okay, at the top of my brain is Sydney, because I love her work, but like, it doesn't go any deeper than that. But it does, but I don't know what happens to my brain, but community beauty to me is really inspirational.
I think we're getting just over the end of our time. And I just want to put one more ask out there. Is there anyone who had a question that's come up that you want to make sure you get to ask? I imagine everyone has a lot to think about. Here we are. Great comments. So, well, thank you. Can we all have a virtual hand for our amazing artists, Lezley Saar and Dana King?
Thank you.
Thank you. I
you.
enjoyed that.
This was great. I
Yeah.
really love seeing your work. Good luck. Congratulations on your soul show.
Oh, well, you too. I have to come up to Oakland to see the sculpture, the public artwork. That's amazing. I'm really in awe.
Thank you.
Beautiful work.
It's really inspiring. Thank you both. And thank you for everyone who's attended. And this video will be made available at some point through Black Woman is God. Thank you for supporting this exhibition series and this conversation series. And I'm honored to have been a part of this today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Be
so
well.
much. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Take care. Recording. There we go.